Welcome back, guys. Today's Sunday, August 7th, 2011. I'm joined by my guest, Ed Haslam. Ed, you were interrupted just as you were connecting everything with Clay Shaw and Lee Oswald. And it's interesting that I wonder myself if Oliver Stone, when he made JFK, if he knew about Judith and he knew about the cancer research and left it out purposely, or if he didn't know about it. Because they even addressed when they questioned David Ferry about where he was going, why he was driving up to, it was like they said, why, I forget how they put it, but it was like, why are you driving like an hour north in a heavy thunderstorm? And he claimed it was to go fishing, but that's when they were going up to back and forth to the hospital there. So I just wonder.
Actually, in the JFK movie, when they asked him about driving in the thunderstorm, they were talking about November 22nd, because that ferry suddenly heads from New Orleans to Houston in the middle of that big thunderstorm. And
I always thought they were referring to when they were shuffling him up to the hospital there, and I wondered if Oliver Stone left it out on purpose. But I guess that answers my question.
Yeah, they really didn't do anything with the Clinton incident in the Oliver Stone movie. What they did do was they talked about Ferry and his mice and his cancer things. And at any rate, so what happens is we're now on September 1, 1963. Judy is banished from New Orleans because she crosses swords with Ochsner over the ethics of what they're doing. Ochsner basically tells her to get out of town, be glad she has her teeth in her mouth, and to stay out of medicine. And so she's banished from medicine. And Lee still has work to do, right? So his job is to wait there in New Orleans until this patient dies in Jackson. And it takes 28 days. And the moment the patient dies, which is September 25th, Lee heads for Mexico. And that is explained in detail in Judy's book. But the point is, his role in going to Mexico, as he understands it, is to deliver the biological weapon to some people, CIA-related people down there who have Cubans that can get it into Cuba in hopes of using it to kill Fidel Castro. Okay, so once you know that Lee Oswald is part of a team that's developing a biological weapon, you know he's not a lone nut. And when you realize that part of that team's efforts is to kill Fidel Castro, you realize he's not a communist. Okay, and that just blows the Warren Commission right out of the water. So that is what happens. Lee then goes up to Dallas, and the rest of that is covered in Judy's book. The point I make in my book is the realization. I mean, Judy tells me one night on the phone that she dropped off stuff over at the Congressman Willis's office across the street from the Riley Coffee Company. Well, Congressman Willis, I'm from New Orleans, and I'm pretty familiar with the politics and who the players were. Willis, you remember Joe McCarthy's HUAC committee that tried to blame everybody for being a communist? And
they were blacklisting everybody.
Right. Well, the guy who ran that committee after Joe McCarthy was Congressman Willis. Okay? That's the House Committee on American Activities. His office is directly across the street from the Riley Coffee Company, and Judy is running envelopes of information from the coffee company over to Willis. Okay? I'm saying, okay, let me see if I'm following this. The cancer researcher who, as a teenage girl, was outperforming the National Cancer Institute in creating cancer, is taking the bus to work at the coffee company where she is a secretary, and she is being escorted with a guy who's about to be accused of assassinating the President of the United States. And when she gets there at the coffee company, her boss sends her across the street to deliver secret messages to the congressman in charge of the House Committee on Un-American Activities. Does that strike you as strange?
It's like, did you ever see, if you look where Guy Bannister's office was, same thing. If you look at where Oswald was hanging out and was quote unquote handing out, pro-communist literature and all that other stuff, and then he was
all right around Lafayette Park there.
Yeah, and it was you had the Office of Naval Intelligence, CIA, FBI. Why the hell would somebody be standing out there just randomly doing that in that section? Come on.
Well, here, let me add a couple of things to that. If you got out on your kitchen table a map of New Orleans and a map of Dallas, right, and you put a blue star on Lee Oswald's place of employment and a red star on the federal courthouse, why are they right next to each other in both cities?
Good question.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you start to look at these things.
But there's not a conspiracy.
More obvious and more obvious as you go along. And, those are some other points. Do you have questions from the chat room? Well,
actually, yeah. One question we got earlier, and I wanted to, I know I asked you this off air, but I did want to address it on air if I had time, was the Garrison should have known Dr. Sherman's injuries. He should have known about, the fact that Mary's rib cage and her arm were vaporized. How come that was never addressed further? How come that was, how did he not? I guess I know there was feds involved, but how was that overlooked?
Well, I'm not sure if it was overlooked. I think it was probably ignored. In 1964, when that happened, that was during that window when Garrison was not paying any attention to the JFK thing. And it was not, in fact, somebody sent me a letter once, a nurse who worked at a doctor's office who said that Garrison and Guy Bannister and some other players were all met in this doctor's office for a meeting right around that time. And I think they were just, Garrison was a military guy and understood that you were supposed to keep secret and everything else. I mean, he probably knew about it, but he did. I'm sure if he got the connection, he would have done something about it, but the point is he didn't get the connection. And I think part of the tragedy of the whole Garrison thing was he had his hands on the big story, and he didn't realize it because he was so focused on the JFK assassination. And that's
I got you. He didn't see the forest for the trees. He was
focused on JFK, and
he was focused on the assassination aspect of it. He wasn't looking and understanding that the assassination itself was actually part of a larger whole
right. Well, let's
thing.
take this Clinton thing. He thought the whole purpose of the Clinton thing was to connect Oswald with a mental institution to make it look like he was somehow crazy and therefore a viable assassin. Okay. Now, the reason Oswald was actually up there at the mental hospital had to do with testing the biological weapon on the patient.
Yeah, that's when he took Judy up there.
Right, and so that's a different thing. And if Garrison had figured out who Judy was, actually, if you read the transcripts of the Garrison trial, they at the very end of the thing, they say, look, we know, we have witnesses in Clinton and Jackson, Louisiana, who saw Lee Oswald with a woman in the car. Okay, we know from talking to Marina that the woman was not Marina Oswald. We know there's another player in this thing, and we don't know who she is. We'd like to know who she is. We'd like to bring her into the courtroom. We'd like to introduce her to you, and we'd like to ask her some questions. Okay, but we don't know who she is, and this is in the transcript of the James Alcock's closing arguments in the Garrison Clay Shaw trial. Now, the point I want to make is I think if they had identified Judy, Judy would have been killed.
Oh, without a doubt. That's why she was told to beat feet.
And she was actually out of the country at the time. She was living, her husband was in oil exploration, and they were living in the eastern Madre Mountains down there in Mexico, and in a very rural area with no phone.
You're going to get cut off by the break again, Ed. Stay right there. Guys, stay tuned. We got one more segment with Ed. Go check out his website during the break, drmarysmonkey.com. The word doctor spelled out, drmarysmonkey.com. And I suggest you get his book and Judah's book as well. Go to meandlee.com and check out Judah's book. We'll be right back.